Have you ever wondered why some men seem completely fine when a woman quietly walks away, only to realize later that her silence has unsettled them more deeply than any argument ever could? This isn't about ordinary breakups or dramatic endings. It's about that kind of departure where there are no tears, no shouting, no blocking, just a stillness so mature, so calm, that it feels almost sacred. Carl Jung once said, like, what is not made conscious manifests as fate, and in this silence, fate comes alive. Picture this. A man, usually in control, convinced he's the one who sets the tempo of the relationship, suddenly finds himself without the familiar script. He thinks, she'll be back, they always come back. His ego reassures him that nothing has changed, yet something has changed completely. Because she's not playing games, not sulking, not waiting for him to chase. She's simply stepped into a new version of herself, one that refuses to beg for scraps of attention. And that silence, instead of being absence, becomes a presence he can't shake. At first, he brushes it off, carries on like nothing happened. He goes out, cracks jokes, posts smiling photos on Instagram, replies to messages as if his world is untouched. But late at night, or in the quiet gaps of his day, a strange unease starts to gnaw at him. It's not quite nostalgia, not yet heartbreak, but something is off. The emotional order he once relied on begins to crumble, and deep inside, his unconscious stirs. As Jung explained, men don't respond to logic first, but to symbols. And now she's no longer the woman who waits around. She's become the symbol of someone who chooses herself. That symbol unsettles him because it doesn't fit his pattern. She doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't chase. She just vanishes into her silence. And the more he tries to label it, whether pride, indifference, or strength, the more restless he feels. He can't stop thinking about her. Days turn into weeks, and the silence keeps echoing back. Suddenly, the control he thought he had starts slipping. He's slower to reply to others, his jokes fall flat, he loses focus at work, he grows irritable. Jung reminded us that when the unconscious pushes through, it shows itself in symptoms. And here it is, in his disrupted sleep, his sudden mood swings, even in his appetite. He tells himself he's fine, but his body disagrees. He goes out more, tries distractions, fills his schedule, but the things that used to numb him no longer do. That's the first crack in his armor. He's no longer able to escape the truth. Meanwhile, she's done nothing. No texts, no pleading, no "we need to talk." And that silence cuts sharper than any confrontation because arguments he knows how to handle. Silence! That throws him completely off script. So he begins justifying to himself, telling little stories in his head. She overreacted. She had flaws too. This was bound to end. But instead of soothing him, those stories betray him. The more he justifies, the clearer it becomes. He hasn't let her go. Because real letting go doesn't need self-defense, it just is. And the irony is brutal. The more he convinces himself she was replaceable, the more irreplaceable she becomes in his thoughts. He remembers tiny details, the way she smiled mid-conversation, the way she once held her tongue instead of clapping back, the way she looked the last time she saw him. Things he ignored when she was around now rise like ghosts. And in dreams, she reappears, not romantically, but symbolically. He sees her across a room, hears her voice but can't reach her. Those dreams leave him waking up restless, a mix of longing and urgency. He doesn't know if he wants her back or if he just can't bear the idea that he no longer can. That's the brutal paradox Jung pointed to. The shadow reveals itself not in clarity, but in confusion. Her silence has forced him into his shadow. Because she's no longer waiting in the wings, he has no script to follow. And that absence is the presence that haunts him. It's not about her words anymore. It's about his reflection in the mirror her silence created. Without an enemy to fight, without someone to blame, he's left only with himself. And that unsettles him more than any fight ever could. For a man used to validation, her quiet dignity feels like a shock. He wasn't ready for that kind of maturity. He expected begging, questions, even anger, because those he could dismiss. But her silence, that's untouchable. It tells him without saying a word, she's done. And suddenly his own ego starts losing the ground it once stood on. He scrolls through her social media, searching for signs. Did she view his story? Is she still watching? Not because it's love yet, but because the ego desperately needs proof it still matters. But proof never comes, and that's where his downfall begins. Because while he's circling in uncertainty, she's already evolved. She's grown into a self that doesn't run after crumbs, that doesn't wait for half love. And now he sees it, not through her actions, but through the silence that screams louder than words. That silence is her transformation and his disorientation. So let me ask you, have you ever chosen silence instead of reaction? Have you ever walked away without drama and realized how powerful that was? Drop your story in the comments, because sometimes the way you handled your silence can give strength to another woman out there who's learning to value herself today. Remember, silence isn't weakness, it's presence. It's maturity. And in a world where people expect drama, your silence becomes the loudest message of all. Carl Jung once said that everything we deny within ourselves eventually rules us from the outside. And when a woman finally goes silent, what awakens inside a man is not just missing her, but confronting the shadow of his own dependency. The part of himself he never wanted to admit was there. At first, he won't say it out loud, not even to himself. He'll scroll past your old photos, tap like on something from months ago, quickly watch your story, and pretend it's casual, but you know what that is. It's a test, his way of whispering, I'm still here. Do you notice? And you see it, you feel it, but you don't move. Not because you're cold, but because you've grown, because you know that jumping back in on impulse would be betraying yourself. And here's the shift. For the first time, he's not the one in control, you are. Because you've stopped seeking answers, and now he's the one asking the question he never thought he'd have to face. Why doesn't she need me anymore? That's the crack in the ego, the place where his story about your worth, depending on him, begins to collapse. He starts to realize it wasn't really you he had. It was your patience, your tenderness, your hope. And now you've pulled those back. He's left with the truth that he never truly had you at all. That hurts, not just because he's losing you, but because it's hitting him that he misread the whole script. You, meanwhile, are no longer the same woman he thought you knew. You're more grounded, more self-aware, more awake, and your silence isn't empty. It's full of presence. And let's be real, that silence isn't just heard, it's felt, deep down in the pauses where your voice used to fill the space. What he feels isn't simple guilt, sadness, or even love. It's confusion, emotional disorientation, the kind that lingers in his body more than in his mind. Jung said that consciousness expands when we face the unknown, and for him, you've suddenly become the unknown, the one thing he can't predict anymore, and that's what drives him mad. He doesn't know if you left from pride, clarity, or healing, and that ambiguity eats at him. Because when a woman walks away without bitterness, without drama, without manipulation, what remains is pure energy, no longer offered, no longer denied, simply unavailable. And that lack of access cracks his sense of control. It's not just about missing your presence, it's about being forced to reflect, to look at himself, to ask why he believed you'd always be there, even when he didn't value, listen, or care the way he should have. For an emotionally immature man, that kind of realization is brutal. So what does he do? He'll reach for the most childish attempt to regain power. A casual DM, a random, "Hey, you good?" sent at some odd hour, not because he's ready to step up, but because he needs to check if he still has access. But here's the difference now. Your reply, if it even comes, carries no urgency, no anxiety, no hidden agenda. It carries presence, clarity, balance. Jung said the soul needs conflict in order to grow. And this is his conflict, not with you, but with himself, with the image of who he thought he was. Because your silence has stripped him of illusions, suddenly he sees he's not as strong as he thought, not as powerful as he believed, and that the woman he took for granted is no longer there, not because she hates him, but because she chose herself. And that truth stings. Now let's flip this back to you. How many times in your life have you responded out of fear of losing someone rather than a genuine desire to stay? How many times have you chosen the relationship over yourself? If you've ever experienced the moment where silence became self-love, where you stopped running and realized your worth didn't depend on anyone else, you know that shift changes everything. Drop your story in the comments, because trust me, another woman needs to hear that today. He won't admit it, but at this point, he feels the loss creeping in. Not from betrayal, not from a big fight, but from silence. That calm, dignified silence that doesn't accuse, doesn't plead, doesn't budge. And that's what unsettles him most, because he always assumed there'd be another chance, another late-night text, another opening. Now there isn't. There's a wall, invisible but unshakable, built from self-respect, dignity, and emotional maturity. And here's the kicker. That wall isn't about punishing him, it's about protecting you. Jung spoke about integrating opposites, the masculine and feminine, the conscious and unconscious, desire and reason, and your silence embodies that balance. You're no longer acting out of need or illusion, you're acting from choice. And he feels that shift, even if he can't put words to it. He tries again, maybe a memory, a song, a random message, not because he's suddenly transformed, but because his soul is scrambling to hold on to what's slipping. Jung said memories carry symbolic weight, and when the unconscious seeks comfort, it clings to them. But you know better now that comfort is no longer your job. You're not here to cushion his guilt, you're here to hold yourself. And that's the deepest turning point. You're no longer afraid of him not coming back, because you've already come back. To yourself, to your center, to your own voice. And that return is worth more than any reconciliation. Because now, even if he showed up, it wouldn't be enough with sweet talk or empty gestures. You'd be listening for depth, for consistency, for real alignment. And here's where many women slip up, confusing guilt with love, nostalgia with commitment. But not you, not anymore. If you've made it this far, you know that feelings without action are just desires, not devotion. Real love transforms. Real love shows up differently, not just with words, but with behavior that finally matches. You're not closed off to love, you're closed off to repeating old wounds. That's not bitterness, that's maturity. And while he remembers you now, not as the woman who waited, but as the one who walked away quietly, that memory becomes a symbol. Jung reminded us that symbols are the language of the unconscious. They can't be ignored, and your silence has become his symbol. He may feel you in songs, in empty spaces, in memories he once brushed off. But now, every echo points him back to the truth. You left with dignity, and that silence will echo louder than any goodbye ever could. Carl Jung once said that individuation is the path toward the fullness of the soul. And while he's still crawling through his own shadows, you've already started walking that path with clarity, not arrogance. And let's be real, clarity hits different. Has anyone ever tried to come back into your life with sweet words, carefully chosen apologies, or some grand promise of change, but deep down, you just knew it was no longer the right time? That it wasn't your place anymore, not because you hated them, but because your self-love spoke louder than their late declaration of love? That kind of inner knowing is powerful, and if you've felt it, your story could be a light for someone else still caught in the storm. Because whether he admits it or not, he knows he's lost you. Not because you left him, but because somewhere along the way, he stopped finding you. The truth is, when a woman becomes emotionally unavailable, it's not the silence that cuts the deepest. It's the serene indifference, that calmness that doesn't accuse, doesn't beg, doesn't even ask questions anymore. That cool detachment that says, without words, you no longer hold the same place in my world. Jung believed real transformation happens when we stop projecting our inner voids onto others, and that's exactly what you've done. You don't project anymore. You don't wait for him to complete you. You finally saw you were never empty. You were just disconnected from yourself. Meanwhile, he's still searching for signs. Maybe he runs into you at a cafe. Maybe he sends a late-night "hey." Maybe he fishes for updates through mutual friends. But every attempt feels like anxiety, not love. Because it's not that he values you more now, it's that he feels less without you. And let's be honest, that's not love, that's ego nursing a wound. But here's the twist. You don't respond like before. Not because you've grown cold, but because you've healed. Healing doesn't make you harder. Healing makes you clearer. You stop negotiating your peace. You stop trying to convince someone to see your worth. Because you finally got it. If someone can't recognize your value while you're right there in front of them, they won't magically value you in your absence either. Painful as it is that truth sets you free. Sure, he might play his last card, showing vulnerability, swearing he's different, opening up in ways he never has before. And maybe he has shifted, maybe he hasn't. But now you know real change isn't spoken, it's shown. It takes consistency, patience, and emotional maturity, not just a one-off text or a teary "I miss you." So while he fumbles with feelings he can't even name, you keep moving forward, not from pride, but from self-respect. Because once you've reached that part of yourself that no longer wants to return to where you lost your voice, you can't go back. That version of you learned how to sit with silence without fearing it, learned how to be alone without feeling abandoned, learned that choices made from love, self-love, will always beat choices made from fear. And now I want to ask you straight, have you already hit that point of no return? That moment when you realized, even if they came back with all the right words, they could never touch that place inside you again. If so, your clarity could be someone else's compass. Write it down, share it, because your story might give another woman the courage to move forward when she's stuck replaying old loops. Because here's the kicker, he feels your absence. But not just the absence of you. He feels the absence of the emotional energy you carried, the care, the presence, the silent stability that held him up even when he didn't earn it. Now in your absence, he realizes what he lost, but it's too late. You're not standing where he left you. You've walked deeper into a part of yourself he doesn't even recognize. You faced your wounds, your emptiness, your shadow desires, and in that silent journey you came back to yourself. Jung said loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about not being able to share what's meaningful. And when you fell silent, you stopped carrying meaning for him. That silence became your loudest word, your strongest act. And if he tries to come back now, you'll see it differently. You won't listen for longing, but for coherence. You won't crave being swept away. You'll be looking for proof in presence, in action, in depth. Because now, love isn't about losing yourself. It's about sharing yourself without abandoning your own center. He may show up with "I miss you" texts, with songs, with nostalgia, with promises, but your heart has learned the difference between words and weight. You no longer need to guard it with walls. Your clarity protects it now. And if you choose to open the door, it'll be because you want to, not because you're scared of being alone. If you choose not to, it won't be from bitterness, but because someone who didn't care in your presence doesn't deserve your return in their loneliness. So reflect for a moment. Have you ever come back so fully to yourself that nobody could shake your center again? If you have, that's your power. Share it. Someone else might need that reflection more than you know. And hey, before you bounce, drop your thoughts below. Ever had that moment where silence said everything words couldn't? Share your story, it might hit home for someone scrolling right now. And if this hit you in the gut, smash that like button, subscribe for more raw psychology talks, and don't be shy about sharing. It could be exactly what your bestie or sister needs to hear today.